Buenas, buenas. Veo que están entrando todos. Bienvenidos a este espacio. Vamos a darle unos minuticos a que lleguen todos. Veo gente conocida, otros por conocer. Saludos a todos. Qué alegría tenerlos en este espacio. Con mucho gusto. Qué delicia crear este espacio. Vamos a darnos 2 minuticos más mientras va llegando todo el mundo.
Una belleza. Qué montón de cosas en el chat divinos. Por fin las veo, mariposas. Hola, hola a todo el mundo. Saludos desde Mendoza, Argentina. Lakshami, hello, good to see you.
Bueno, muy bien. Yo creo que ya estamos suficientes para arrancar. Bienvenidos todos. Entonces, todos venimos de un miércoles, posiblemente jueves en otros lados, muy agitado. Y es el momento como de bajarle al ritmo, de concentrarnos en este espacio, de dejar todos los ajites de lado. Entonces los vamos primero como a invitar a respirar profundo y desde ahí como poder arrancar nuestra conversación. Ay, entonces los invito a que cada uno cierre sus ojos. Suelte como todas las tensiones del cuerpo. Y los invito a que respiremos profundo las veces que consideren necesario, pero al menos 3. Podemos inspirar y llenar todos esos pulmones, sentir cómo se llenan, cómo todo el pecho, el diafragma, todo se abre, se expande. Y soltar poco a poco, poco a poco. Cuando el aire se acabe, volver a arrancar y dejar que el mismo organismo como que siga sus impulsos. Y a la vez que vamos inspirando, nos vamos llenando de vida. Y a medida que vamos expirando y botando el aire, sentimos como a poco vamos soltando todo el cuerpo, de arriba hacia abajo, como una ola que se lleva todo, que se lleva todas las tensiones. Inspiramos y botamos y soltamos todo y nos enraizamos cada vez en este momento, en este lugar, cada uno en el suyo, todos conectados, juntos, creando este campo colectivo de conciencia, de inspiración, de entendimientos, de profundidad, despertando todos esos esas conexiones internas, dejando que las preguntas tengan espacio en nuestros cuerpos. Y los invito a abrir los ojos. A ubicarnos aquí juntos. Y bueno, brevemente, Efecto Mariposa es una organización que está muy consciente de los tiempos cambiantes en los que estamos. Y tenemos como una necesidad profunda de las tripas, como de poder tejer, ver tanto los caminos como las brújulas que nos llevan por la transformación del mundo. Y que aborda pues un poco todos los aspectos de la vida, ecológicos, psicológicos, sociales de nuestras relaciones, culturales, nuestra manera de ver, de relacionarnos, de pensar qué es la realidad, los valores, etc. Y bueno, y en asocio con Animas Valley, creamos estas charlas. Y Animas Valley es una organización que en el desarrollo humano reconoce que hay una etapa de la vida en la cual cada uno de nosotros hace un descenso al alma o tiene esa oportunidad. Y justamente es un espacio pues, que ahondaremos en esta conversación. Pero que de alguna manera nos va dando nuestros dones al mundo en la que podemos verlos. Pero no es una etapa fácil, requiere como una metamorfosis. Y Animas Valley hace justamente eso, genera los espacios como esas crisálidas para que cada persona pueda hacer ese viaje. Entonces le voy a pasar la voz a Aleja Balcázar y a Nate Bacon. Bienvenidos a esta conversación. Aleja and
Gracias, Adri.
Nate, very welcome to this conversation. We're so happy to have you here. And well, I already introduced Efecto Mariposa and Animas Valley. Aleja, she is part of our team of Efecto Mariposa, and Nate comes from Animas Valley, and we have been working together in Efecto Mariposa for already 5 years, bringing those spaces to Colombia. And so very welcome to both of you. We are very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Adri. Nate, welcome. Good to hear from you here. Bueno, es una conversación que esperamos que se dé como de una manera muy fluida y que vaya tocando poco a poco como esos temas importantes en esto que llamamos el descenso al alma, que suena rarísimo. Entonces vamos a ir poco a poco como para que todas las personas legos y no tan legos en esto vayan pudiendo como seguir el hilo de la conversación. Nate, es un placer estar contigo realmente para tratar uno de estos temas que para mí es como tremendamente misterioso, asombroso, transformador, mágico, por solo nombrar como algunas de las cualidades de eso que me viene a la mente ahora, el descenso al alma. Es como esa saga, como ese journey, como ese camino que emprendemos con la intención de deshacer de cierta forma el ego que por tantos años hemos ido como creando como nuestra identidad y que ha aprendido a relacionarse con su entorno, como a sentirse cómodo entre sus ropas, pero llega un momento como un vendaval, es algo así como un instante, como un proceso en donde todo eso que parecía funcionar deja de funcionar. como que nos deja de representar, como que ya no nos contiene, como que hay algo que falta. Y hay voces internas como que hablan de una posibilidad de explorar mundos mucho más profundos, mucho más, sí, mágicos, digámoslo en cierta forma, y nos están como llamando, como básicamente poniéndonos en el lugar en el cual todo eso que habíamos vivido no lo queremos vivir, ya no queremos seguir haciéndolo, ya no nos da respuesta, pero no sabemos claramente eso qué significa ni para dónde va. Entonces, conversar sobre esa saga, sobre ese momento que rompe un poco como esa adolescencia y empieza a pintar la posibilidad de un ser humano tempranamente maduro o más maduro, ese momento en el cual rompemos un poco con todo aquello que hemos aprendido desde la niñez a la adolescencia y empezamos a delinear como ese camino único, particular, irrepetible de cada uno de nosotros, que como decía Adri, trae o manifiesta en la vida esos dones que cada uno de nosotros trae. Hacerlo aquí hoy, en esta conversación, de la mano de Nate, que ha estado con nosotros conociendo nuestros territorios, conociendo nuestra gente, es realmente un privilegio para todos los que estamos aquí oyéndolo. So Nate, good to see you tonight, and let me start with this basic but not an easy question, and that is, what do you mean when you say soul?
Thank you, Aleja. And thank you, Audrey, for opening the space for us and for your introduction. And Aleja, I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with you. Before I dive into that question, which is the central question probably, I just want to say that I'm used to being able to seeing people's faces, and I can't see all of you all that are listening.
Yeah, that is because this is a webinar and we are not going to be able, because there were lots of people asking to be present in this conversation. And so we had to change from a natural Zoom to a webinar. And there's no this possibility to see all these faces, but we can imagine them, Nate.
Yes, absolutely. And so I just want to say hello to all of you people out there who may be faceless on the screen, but I know you are real people out there, many miles from where I am here, but hello to you and thank you for joining. Also, because I can't see your faces, I don't really get any kind of feedback from you. So please feel free to use the chat, and if something's resonating, let us know, let me know. If you're confused, please ask questions. We'll get to your questions toward the end of our conversation. So please do use the chat feature. And
That's so nice. Sergio Sanchez is saying, we are smiling, Nate. And just for you to know that we are smiling.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. What do we mean by soul? That's a question that makes me want to take one sip of tea before I start to answer.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's the central question. It's what this entire conversation hinges on, is what do we mean by soul? Maybe the first thing to recognize or to acknowledge is that there are lots of different ways that word is used. I don't know as nearly obviously as much about how it's used in the Spanish-speaking world, but in the English-speaking world, as I'm sure many or most of you know, it's used in all kinds of different ways, and usually without any kind of explicit meaning. It's kind of thrown around as a really loose concept or a loose idea, and what we usually mean by it is sometimes taken for granted, but very unclear. And very likely that in any given conversation about soul, people are operating from different notions or different ideas about what soul even is or what it could mean, and that it often has something to do with some kind of immaterial spirit that's a part of who I am, but is somehow different than my body. And so I don't want to say that that's a wrong definition. It's the right definition if that's the definition that you're using, but it's not at all what what I mean by soul, and the topic of this conversation tonight. We mean something completely different by that word. And there are several different ways to describe it, and maybe I'll try a few of them here. Maybe at the root of all of them, though, is that soul is fundamentally it's a relational notion. It's a relational state of being, or a relational dimension of the way the world actually works. And by relational, I mean all things in relationship with everything else. And I'll say more about that phrase later, I'm sure, but all things in relationship with everything else. That's what the world is. That's what makes the world, is everything in relationship with everything else. And we might think of soul in this sense as any being or anything really, living or non-living, as their place within the larger whole. And that the place is constituted by the set of relationships that we inhabit with everything else. So everything in the world inhabits a different constellation or pattern of relationships than any other thing in the world.
Nate, ¿es eso a lo que te refieres cuando se habla del alma como un nicho ecológico? Is that you are describing the ecological niche that sometimes we hear you saying, like there is a specific niche, ecological niche for your soul? Is that what you are meaning here?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was building up to. Yeah, ecological niche. It's a soul in this, how we use it is fundamentally it's an ecological concept. But the caveat there is that there's nothing that's not ecological. The ecological just, it means, well, first of all, oikos is the Greek word. It means something like habitat or home. And logos, of course, is just the study of, or the exploration of, the speaking of home. So an ecological thing is just our way of understanding habitat, which is to say the earth or the world. You could even expand that concept out to the cosmos, where we're all made of the leftover remnants of a supernova. And that's a pretty mysterious
it is indeed
to say there. And that I just bring that in just to say that there's nothing that's not ecological even in the sense of something other than biological, ecological in the sense of just the relationship amongst the things that make up the world, and that those patterns of relationships being the world. So yeah, soul in this sense means, well, how we mean it is the place that everything inhabits in the world, the niche that something that something lives or embodies in the world. It's their ecological niche, meaning everything not only is a part of the world, everything has a place in the world, but everything is a necessary part of the world. If any given niche, any given being, any given group of beings, etc., didn't exist, the world would be fundamentally a different place. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would notice it if something small just disappeared. But that's because our consciousness is incapable of seeing all of those things. So the world is made up of all things right now in this moment, of all things in relationship with everything else. And so everything that makes up the world is a necessary and vital part of the whole that makes the whole what it is. So that's the niche we're talking about. So everything inhabits an ecological niche. Everything, I don't say has a soul in the sense of it's something that we possess, but we have a soul in the sense it's something that we belong to, that we are, that it's our way of belonging to the world. It's not a possession that we have by virtue of being a living human being.
That's a beautiful explanation. Nate, listening to you, it seems like everything has its place in that ecological relationship with everything. How is it that that we are so unique or so special. Is that our soul belongs to us, or we belong to our soul in that way, that there's nothing that it belongs to you? I mean, it's you, entirely you, and nobody else has this possibility of be in that place.
Yeah, which is, I think, the miracle of the preciousness of all life and all of the parts of the world. Yeah, that's true for all of us. Go ahead.
Es como esa, estás diciendo como que realmente cada ser en el planeta tiene esa particularidad, ese lugar único a través del cual, digamos, como trae su voz a un concierto de vida que se orquesta entre muchos, todos los seres. Y dices que esa alma es particular, es única, es irrepetible. So could you talk a little bit more about this idea of what you mean by unique and particular and irrepeatable? So
yeah, those are some words that you've been hearing me say for a number of years now. Yeah, so just to be clear, we haven't even started talking about the particularities of the human soul and the psychospiritual journey that we call the descent to soul, which we'll get to, but I'm still speaking in very broad terms now about everything in the world, from an elephant in Africa to a redwood tree in California to the tiniest spider going through the bosque in the cloud forests of Colombia. Everything is a unique and particular part of the world. It's a unique and particular part of the whole. And so, yeah, unique meaning never before seen, never to be seen again. So the soul of any given being, including us humans, is something never before seen, never to be seen again. It's something, the world is not only made up of relationships, it's made up of, it's a process, it's an ongoing, ever unfolding process. And that process is always creating the world anew. So the world is not a static place, it's always becoming something different, because those webs of relationships are always themselves changing. And so in the history of the universe, there has never been another Aleja, and there will never be another Aleja ever again. Just like there will never be that particular elephant, or even the particular bacteria that is inside the stomach of that elephant. And that will never happen again. So they never inhabit the exact same niche in the larger whole, the exact same place in the world that any other part of the world has ever or will ever inhabit. So that's unique. Particular meaning it's something particular. It's not just any old thing. Like, you are Aleja, I am Nate. My teacup is my teacup. And so that the unfolding process of the world means that the molecules that make up who we are, they emerge into this form, and then when I die, or when my teacup breaks and decomposes, it will become something different and will emerge into some other new forms in the world. But these manifestations are completely unique, but also particular. They are something embodied, real. They are precisely what they are.
Es un poquitico, wow. Es un poquitico, wow, como astonishing, como increíble, ¿no? El sentir en este momento que no ha habido, que no hay y que nunca habrá un ser como yo, o como cualquiera de nosotros, o como cualquiera de los seres de la existencia, ni siquiera la posibilidad de que en el futuro o en el pasado hayan existido o vayan a existir seres como uno. Why is that? Why is that everything has this unique place in the existence?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know why. Why is a causal question that is left to, I don't know. I think maybe only the mystery knows that, or why? Is there another way to ask your question that I might be able to say something about?
Yeah, sure. Let's go thinking of the descent to the soul. Aquí estamos hablando un poco como de ese descenso que es como esa saga, ese camino, esa manera como de transitar hacia un lugar que parecería estar como movilizando, o haciendo una movilización de mi voluntaria o no hacia el interior de mi ser. So Nate, let's talk a little bit about this process of the descent to soul. How is it? Do we have patterns that humans go through to follow to that descent? Does it take many time? It's something that happens in just a day. Can you please explain a little bit more about this process?
Yeah, sure. Let me draw a couple of threads between what I was just saying and the heart of your question right now. Try to draw a couple of connections. Maybe the most important piece to say is that at least from the place of our human consciousness, it appears to us that every other part of the world seems to naturally take their place in the world, so to naturally fully inhabit their niche in the world. Like the red fox cannot be fully that red fox. But that there seems to be something about the particular style of consciousness of human beings where we where we've been designed by the world, by evolution, by the universe, by God, whatever you want to say, we seem to have been shaped to require a part of our maturation process to be a kind of a journey, a psycho-spiritual journey, or is to say a human developmental journey, a part of our human development process, to become conscious of our ultimate place in the world, or our ecological niche. I added psycho in there. I don't think we've said that. Psycho meaning of the psyche. So another way to, this is a tangent. Another way to say that everything is ecological, for me at least, is to say everything is of the psyche. Right? A psyche is not a human only possession, as we usually kind of think of it, something that humans have and that separates us from everything else. But the psyche, the intelligence, the creativity of the universe infuses all things. But we all have different styles with that manifest in various species or parts of the world. So the psycho-ecological niche is meant to imply that this is as much about our psyches as it is about our biological placement in the world. So our psycho-ecological niche, it appears that in humans, we have to go on a kind of journey to discover our ultimate place in the world, to discover that psycho-ecological niche, to become conscious of it. And that essentially that's a short definition of the descent to soul, is a process. It's a psycho-spiritual process of becoming conscious of at least a dimension, an element of our psycho-ecological niche. And before we say anything else, it would be important to note here also that because this kind of journey seems to be required of us, we're not born knowing it. Maybe we're born knowing it, but we don't have the kind of consciousness once we get older to remember. Maybe that's true, I don't know. But when we're children and teenagers and oftentimes well into adulthood, sometimes these days through our whole lives, we may not ever find our way into becoming conscious of our ultimate place in the world, becoming conscious of the place that the world most longs for us to inhabit, to embody, to enact, that place from which we can offer our deepest gifts to the pattern of relationships that we inhabit in the world, which is, these are some other ways to talk about soul. Yeah, the very intriguing and heartbreaking, even tragic implication there, if we have to go on this journey, it means that we can also fail to fully inhabit, to fully live, to enact, embody, give the gifts of our soul. We never become conscious of it, and then from that place of consciousness to embody and enact those gifts for our people, which is to say for the rest of the world, but for our people is a phrase that we like to use.
Wow. Eso significaría como un poco vidas perdidas. I mean, what you were saying means like somebody has like a lost life or something like not complete, or can we live without reaching that point, or how is it to live without it?
I wish I had the beautiful Adrienne Rich poem with me.
We do have it.
You have that?
I thought that would be of use tonight, so probably we can share the screen and probably read it. Yeah. Aleja, are you there? So can I share my screen? Are you listening to anybody here? Because I don't. Nos dejaron solos.
You can share, Aleja. I'm here.
Okay, great. Let me see, because I don't know, where do I have this poem? I think I got it. Wait a minute. I'm connecting.
Aquí lo tengo.
Ay, qué bueno, Adri. Can you share it? Because I'm looking for it. I thought, great.
It is. I have I know it as a different title. The title that I know it as is Prospective Immigrants, Please Note.
Okay.
And so this is a great question. This is a great poem also about the call to adventure, which is I think we'll probably end up talking about this more, but like when Mystery says, hey, knocks on your door and says, hey, it's time for you to come on this journey. We'll say more about that at some point, but this is also a poem about that. This is Adrienne Rich. Either you will go through this door or you will not go through. If you go through, there is always the risk. This is if you go through the door. If you go on the journey, there's always the risk of remembering your name, your true name, which is to say your true place in the world. Things look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. And here's Adrienne Rich's answer to your question. If you do not go through, it is possible to live worthily, to maintain your attitudes, to hold your position, to die bravely. But much will blind you. Much will evade you. At what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. It is only a door. So this poem is a beautiful answer to the something of the feeling quality of not going through that door, or not even recognizing the call to come through the door, or never even being eligible developmentally to go through the door, or to being called to come through the door. But the part that she doesn't address is the loss to the world, the loss to everything else.
Yeah.
If the world is what it is by virtue of everything in relationship with everything else, for us to as fully as we can to live and enact the mysteries at the center of our lives, the mysteries at the center of what we're born to bring into the world, which is not so much about what we do, but about how we be, and therefore what we do in the world. Then that's a loss for the world. The world can't become exactly what it wants to be because of the loss of that possibility.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot, there's a lot of implications there around the kind of culture, society that we have in the 21st century now. Which, you kind of look around at all of the challenges of across the world, all of the ecological devastation, the cultural, political crises, the spiritual crises, ecological and biological collapse, climate change, etc. One perspective, one way we might begin to look at this more fully is that this is what happens when people of the dominant culture don't live their true lives, don't find their way into the most generative expressions of themselves. Then if most of the people are like that, then the culture itself becomes that, and then even intentionally and unintentionally represses that journey for its people. A whole lot of implications there. That's a whole nother road we could go down, but just wanted to mention it's a loss for the world also, not just for the person.
Okay, Nate, can you write down in the chat the title of that poem, please?
Title of the poem?
Yep. And while you do that, I'm going to say something. Hay una palabra en todo este proceso que a mí me causa como inquietud, y es que hablamos de un descenso. Un descenso. Why is it a descent, Nate? Are you suggesting to go down to where? Why is it a descent and not, for example, going up or east or west? Are you implying a kind of a visit to the underworld with this process?
Yeah, the underworld, exactly. And then, of course, the question is, what do we mean by that? Yeah, I think at the most fundamental level, the somatic experience of being an animal on this planet Earth lends itself to some really kind of deep patterns, some deep archetypes that are so deeply in us. One is our experience of the sky above us, where if we go to the top of a mountain or the top of a tree, or imagine ourselves flying like a bird, we have a larger view, a larger expanse where we see all things and they all kind of blend together and the world looks as if it's one. And that kind of the consciousness that has been shaped in humans over the millennia and millions of years of our evolution, of our being shaped into who we are, the kind of consciousness that we humans have today. That experience of the sky has shaped the religious, spiritual, psychological, mythological notions of transcendence and unity and the oneness of all things. Whereas we have always also not only been in relationship with sky and that which is above us, but also that which is beneath us. And also the inside of things, like the inside of the tree trunk, the underneath of things, and of course the underneath of the ground, where for millennia humans have been burying their dead. And so for probably as long as we've had our contemporary style of human consciousness, deep into the Paleolithic, we have had this association with the descent as being the kind of other polar realm of a kind of consciousness, which Thomas Berry coined a phrase of inscendence, which is the complement of transcendence, inscendence, to go into, to go within, to go deep. And so that's the psycho-spiritual terrain of the underworld. So the underworld it's not a place, it's not a geographical place, it's not somewhere that you go, although the stories, the way that we have to share and teach and learn and discover and articulate these kinds of patterns is the person in the myths goes somewhere, and most often it's down, but it's at least far over the horizon into the realm of the unseen, the unknown, into the depths of what can't be known here. And so the underworld is it's a state of consciousness. It's a style of consciousness that includes some kind of deep archetypal concepts like transformation, death, dying, rebirth, sex, the changing of things. And it's also the place of uniqueness and particularity, whereas the transcendent realm is the place of unity, the oneness of all things. The underworld is the place of the uniqueness and particularity of all things. And of course, they're not opposites, they're complements. We need both of these styles of consciousness because both of these are how the world works. You can't have one without the other. The whole requires all of the parts of the whole to be what the whole is. Just as the parts require the whole, because the parts are the whole is the overall pattern of relationships of the parts in relationship to each other. And so the underworld consciousness is the realm of in humans, it's the realm of the discovery of the unique and particular mystical relationship that I or we are born to have with the rest of life, with the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a descent in that sense. It's not a literal descent, but it's a psycho-spiritual, mythic descent into the realm of the dead, the dying, the transformative, the changing, the unique in particular.
Yeah. Well, in listening to you, I just wonder if this descent to soul is something new to our culture, or if there is like ancient cultures that have already worked on that descent to soul. Is this knowledge new to humanity, or how is it that we come to say a descent to soul?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think mostly it's that mostly the answer is that this is as old as our humanity itself. But what's the little caveat that I want to make here is that because everything is unique in particular, the cultural manifestations, or especially in times and places that were very different from ours, the way that we would articulate it, the way that we would support people, the way that it might be experienced is going to be different. Probably has a lot of similarities, but different, given that just how different living in the world in these times is from what it was like to live as a hunter-gatherer in the sub-Saharan African continent 40,000 years ago. Very different. But what's the same are the somatic fundamental patterns of our embeddedness in the earth, our experience of a realm of consciousness that beckons to us, that even if we're afraid of it, and even if Western society has deemed it as evil, and equated the underworld with hell, place of suffering, and that we wouldn't want to go at any cost. Even despite all of this, we can still recognize that there's some kind of draw, there's some kind of allurement into this realm of consciousness, and that's always been true. And for as long as we've been human, I think it's one of the defining parts of our humanity. One of the things that is common amongst all peoples is the need, the desire, the evolved developmental urge to say yes to the call of mystery in this kind of way. But yeah, the manifestations of them would be very different, but also very similar. For example, paying attention to your dreams, movement, rhythm, fasting, the ways that we can support and say yes to this journey, support others to say yes to that call. The territory is, I think, mostly the same, but the way that it manifests is, I'm sure there's as many instances of that as there have been people that have undertaken the journey.
Okay, let's go into the descent to soul. And I asked you before, are there patterns that we humans follow in that descent to soul, or how can you recognize where you are and what is going on with you down there?
Patterns in the descent to soul? I'm not sure what you're asking yet, Aleja. Will you?
Yeah. For example, if we're talking here about a descent to soul, I just want to know if, of course, it's very particular for everybody. Each one has its own call and its own ways and times and things like those. But are a kind of patterns that we are following through that descent? So, I mean, you hear the knock on the door, and then what?
Got it. Yeah. There's a basic pattern, which is really helpful. It's orienting in the way that helps us become more disoriented, which is an essential part of that disorientation is an essential part of the whole process. First thing I want to say is that we don't get to decide to go on this journey. It's not something that we can consciously just decide to do. It's also not possible for our, the guides, the people supporting us, our elders or whomever is there to support us. It's not possible for them to decide either. We don't make that decision.
So you mean that the mystery is the one who's calling you? Exactly.
It's the world. That's how I say it. The world, that's the whole of all the things in relationship to everything else. We become ripe in just the right way in relationship to everything else, that the world or the mystery says, you're ready, come on. That beautiful life that you've built for yourself, that you have worked so hard to create, and the socio-cultural roles and relationships that you have made for yourself in this, what David White, the poet, would call your first house of belonging. Rainer Maria Rilke also writes about this kind of thing. That first house of belonging has to be a really beautiful house. It has to work really, really well, both socioculturally and also intra-psychically, so within my own psyche. So much what in our circles we call cultivating our wholeness and attending to our self-healing, which a different topic, and I think was the topic of the last talk.
Yeah, it was the topic of our first conversation here with Brian. Yeah, but it's really good for you to remind us what you mean by wholeness.
Yeah. So cultivating the aspects of our wholeness, which are common to all of us as human beings. And we have a map that we use to identify those patterns. But the point being, the aspects of our wholeness are common to all of us. So something different than our soul, which is unique and particular, but the aspects of our wholeness are common to all of us. And cultivating cultivating our wholeness and building that first house of belonging in a way that works really well socioculturally seems to be what's required of us to become developmentally eligible. And by developmentally, I just mean the way that we've been designed to unfold in our lives. And this actually might be the territory of what's different from us in our contemporary modern context than from, for example, nature-based, viable, place-based indigenous cultures around the world, and especially in the past when they were more abundant. Is the challenge of building a first house that works really well in a pathological cultural context. And so really the descent to soul, I'm talking about the first of the 5 phases of the descent to soul that we tend to recognize. But essentially it's from birth, or even before birth, if you want to, all the way until you hear the knock at the door. And that's the phase of the descent to soul that we call preparation. Which, another way to say that in a more poetic way is ripening. It's like a kind of ripening. And when the mystery says, that's a beautiful life that you made. And I'm going to come back to this. It's important that we get really good at making a beautiful life, of making a beautiful first house of belonging. That will be really important in just a few moments.
Okay.
But the mystery knocks on our door, not literally, but figuratively. Somehow it grabs hold of us and yanks us down, like a trap door that falls out underneath us. Or my favorite image is the old crooked finger of the old witch that says, "Come." And that, if we say yes, willingly or begrudgingly, if we say yes, then, and we begin that descent process, then we move from preparation to what we call dissolution. So dissolution meaning it's the noun form of the verb to dissolve. Like a caterpillar dissolves in its chrysalis, in its cocoon. The other ways to talk about this phase is as a dying process, or a dismemberment process. The Inanna myth is great about with the imagery of dismemberment at the 7 gates. But it's a dissolution. It's a dying. It's the phase of the descent to soul in which that beautiful life that we made for ourselves it falls apart, because we release our attachment to it, because we recognize that there's something else waiting for us that is so much more important, so much more alluring, that we're willing to sacrifice that first house of belonging, willing to sacrifice everything we know about who we are, everything, how we've understood ourselves up to this point in our lives, the roles that we inhabit, the relationships that we inhabit, or at least how we inhabit those relationships. And we have to release our attachment to those, which is to say our old life has to die. We have to die.
And this is the point where you say yes, or you have already said yes in order to dissolve. And how you say yes?
It's a great question. Yeah. There's no single yes moment. Here's the most important thing, I think, in that, we can only speak in images, and we can only speak about something poetically or mythically, because there's no literal description. There's no literal way to speak about something that's a psycho-spiritual unfolding. But so that, like the image of the trapdoor falling out underneath us, right? It's like, it's as if we fall through, into the basement or into the underworld. And we don't have a choice. Or this is the opposite of what I was saying earlier about we don't get to decide. We can't just say, I think I'm going to do that. That was a really interesting webinar that I listened to. I'm going to go do that descent to soul thing. It's not possible. I mean, you can go through the motions, but you're not going to be in the territory in the same way as if there actually is a call, and if that knock and that crooked finger actually do come. But then when they come, it's not just a complete, it's not a complete and total submission. What's important here is that it's a participation. So we're participating with the world, which is itself a kind of practice to be able to grow the kind of ears that can hear the whisperings of the mystery. So it's like we're practicing the very thing that we will have to get really good at doing in order to become conscious of our soul, to become conscious of our place in the world, and then embody it in the world. Is to listen, to learn how to listen to the whisperings of our soul, which is to say of the world, just to say of the mystery or the underworld. And so if we have to learn to listen for that and respond and be active in our participation, but also letting our lives fall apart, like letting ourselves participating in our own dying.
Well, it seems like a big decision. I mean, it's something that sounds like risky, a little bit risky. And the question is, what is down there that is worth the whole journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just really want to emphasize this point though of the act of participation, because that is what changes us. The act of participation, the act of letting go of that first house of belonging, which is rooted in the socio-cultural sphere.
Yeah.
And learning to listen, learning to be in conversation with, learning to engage consciously with something beyond the socio-cultural, with the mystery, with the concentric circles that are outside of the social cultural realm, and that are into the realm of the more than human world, the mysteries of the wild earth, the mysteries of the wild cosmos, the mysteries of my own being, of the mysteries of the presence of being here at all, and the mysteries of the particular longings that I carry, the mysteries of the particular griefs that I carry, the mysteries of the particular encounters that I have that no one else has, right? And like we talked about earlier in the morning,
yeah,
no one else saw that sunrise this morning with the same eyes that I saw it with. No one else heard the raven flying over my head as I was walking back from town with the same ears, which is to say the same style of consciousness that I heard them with. And so we're talking about a realm that's outside of the socio-cultural, but it's not transcendent, it's not beyond, it's completely within, but it's within the realm of a kind of active participation with the more than human world, with the wild world, with the natural world, with the whole of the earth. And that's what's waiting for us down there. So I can't speak with specificity beyond my own particular experience, because again, it's unique in particular for everyone.
Yeah.
But in a general way, it's the heart of our own way of being in relationship with the more than human world, which includes the human, but is also includes the other than human. It's the more than human world, which is completely and utterly mysterious and magical and full of life and creativity and intelligence. Not that it's not that we get to understand, something in an intellectual way about the some kind of, it's not about a retrieval of knowledge. It's a transformation of consciousness that is rooted in our becoming conscious of the longing that Earth, or that the world, that the cosmos, becoming conscious of the longing that the world has for us, for what the world wants us to be, to do, to embody, to inhabit, to live into the world. And that is the gift. That's the gift that in all the stories, the hero comes back with a gift for his people, or her people. And but that's the gift. It's who we become. It's not some thing that we come back with. It's who we become, and how, and then how we shape the world, which is the Efecto Mariposa idea. It's the idea of the butterfly effect, is who we become ripples out into the world. And the change may not be enormous, because we're just a single person after all. But what we do shapes in a generative way, in a culturally and ecologically generative way, that is life enhancing, that is mystery enhancing, that's earth enhancing, rather than destructive. And so it's what we discover down there is not really about what we discover. It's about what we recognize as the truth of who the world wants us to be.
Good. There's another thing here that calls my attention, and this is if going down there has this precious gift for you and for the world, how do you make available to the mystery to be eligible for that journey? Is there a way to work on that?
To become eligible for
yeah
it's that preparation phase. As far as we've been able to discern the process of healing and holing, or say that in the way that we usually say it, the process of cultivating aspects of wholeness, which we call holing, to make whole, and self-healing, which is kind of it's a kind of transforming of our relationships with the kind of small making, wounded parts of ourselves that we often think we have to get rid of, or go to therapy for, or the kind of inner critic and pieces like that. Really, it's about transforming our relationships with them. Again, this is the topic of the last public talk that Brian Stafford participated in with you. It's also the topic of Bill Plotkin's book, Wild Mind. And it is oriented around a map, the nature-based map of the human psyche.
Yeah.
So there's that piece, and then there's also the dimension of I'm trying not to talk about a model of human development that we use. I'm trying not to address it directly, but the phase that comes right before this, in the developmental, the eco-soul-centric developmental model that we use, is the primary task of the phase right before this is to cultivate a social presence in the world that both works socially, meaning we're accepted by our peers, and we have a social cultural place in the world, and role and relationships that work, but is also authentic or authentic enough, which there's the rub, which makes it way harder in our culture to be deeply and truly authentic and have a social cultural presence that works. And so that's the task, is to do both, which is, as you might see the intertwinement here of that task, that developmental task, with the process of cultivating our wholeness and self-healing, which is we have to become someone that's like psychologically mature, like a mature adult, in a generative, ecocentric kind of way, which strangely enough is really quite rare in our culture these days. But I also can't just give a clear answer, because we're going off of patterns, like people that we recognize, we being underworld guides like myself, guides to the descent to soul, recognize the patterns over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, you're ripe, you've heard the call, like come on, I'll support you in this dissolution process. These are people that have seem to have done a lot of this work, whether they've had any experience with the maps and models that we use or not, that's irrelevant. But that have tended the world, developed a kind of ecocentric consciousness, not just in thought, but in relationship to the world, like begun to grow eyes and ears and have a capacity to be in relationship with the other than human world, and be authentic and have an authentic but viable social presence in the world. These are not easy tasks, but this tends to be the territory that comes right before.
Nate, we have time, I think, for the last question, and then we open to questions to the public. But I would like to know, the language of soul seems to prefer images, how to relate to them, how to work in them, and to make yourself available for those images and for this connection.
Yeah, will you say that one more time, Audrey? Not Audrey, Aleja, so I can make sure I'm understanding your question correctly.
Yeah, I was trying to say, well, there's a preferred language that our soul uses to communicate with us, and that is images, right? And those images come to you in very different ways. So I wanted you to speak a little bit about these images, and how can you cultivate them and offer yourself to those images.
Okay, thank you. So it's yes, it seems, based on my personal experience, the experience of everyone else that I've known, and also of the realm of myths and how myths work and speak to us, that the language of soul, the way that soul communicates, to us, is not cognitive. It's not about knowledge or understanding. It's not about trying to get something. It's not about trying to achieve a certain kind of something like knowledge. It's not cognitive at all. Rather, soul speaks in images. Yes, it's central, but as long as we consider images not just a visual thing, they can be visual. Often for people, they are visual, but they can be auditory, they can be kinesthetic, they can just be a kind of feeling tone. Soul also speaks through metaphor, symbol, again, myth, these realms, poetry, these realms that are something. The image that I like to use, here's image again, is how we kind of circumambulate, how we can go around and around something and kind of describe it and point toward it and say it's kind of like this, as we move around it and around it, but we can never go right into the center of it because it's beyond our cognitive capacity. It's beyond, it's something larger than we can name. It's something larger than our style of language has the capacity to articulate. And also because it's not human. It's not, this isn't something that, again, soul, back to the very beginning of our conversation, soul is not exclusively human. The only thing that's human about this whole thing is, so it seems, is that we have to, that we're designed to go on a process to discover it in a conscious kind of way, just because of the kind of consciousness that humans have. But why would soul speak in a purely human language? Soul speaks in an experience. Soul speaks in encounter with the rest of the world. That's, again, soul is a relational concept. It's a relational reality, I should say. It's not a concept. And so the ways that soul allows us to feel that relational context, all of those are eligible for, all of those are available as a means of communication. So, again, it comes from feelings, it comes from the depths of our imagination, but our imagination is not something that it's not the territory of something we make up. It's the territory of our tapping into the creative imagination of the earth, deep imagination. I mean, there are more superficial versions of that where we are just kind of making things up, but yeah, soul inhabits that kind of territory in our psyches, and that's where the communication comes from as well. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I just want to say something. For example, listening to everybody here, probably we have many people that is in that verge, in that point of listening to that knocking door. Yeah. What would you say to that person that doesn't know how to act or how to move around this possible descent to self? What to do, and how you as a guide would support somebody who is at that verge, at this state, at this process, in this moment?
Hearing that knock on the door?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, maybe the most important thing would be just to affirm that it's real. That's probably the first thing. Just to affirm that it's real and it's important. It's so important. It's, there are the practical dimensions of being a human being in contemporary modern Western world, like our jobs and our social roles and various things like that. But there's more to the story than what our culture will have us believe, and our culture offers to us as possible experiences. There's more, and there's no like secret. There's no red pill, blue pill thing. That would be so nice if there were, but there's not. It's not that easy. The way the world works is much more complex and so much more beautiful than that. So there's no simple answer, but what I often tell people is if I was going to distill guidance into one phrase, it would be something like, follow your longing, your deepest longing, and follow your deepest grief. Let your heart be broken open by your longing. Like, what do you truly long for in the world, in your life? Like when you get underneath all of the other things that you think you want, What is it that you truly long for? And start pulling at that thread without any expectation of where it will take you or if it will take you anywhere. And offer your attention to the world. Offer your attention outward just as much as inward, probably more, especially to the other than human world. The human world is beautiful and tragic all at the same time. The whole world is beautiful and tragic at the same time, but there's so much more to the human consciousness in relationship to the other than human world than most people recognize. We have been so fundamentally and deeply shaped by our relationships with the other than human world that we've so deeply forgotten that, so deeply moved away from that in our day-to-day lives. Just like learning, remembering how to offer our attention, not just our sight, not just our physical senses, but our imagination, our feeling sense, but also our senses, our bodies, our tactile senses, offering our attention to the other than human world and allowing our longing and our grief to have their way with us. And pluck on those threads. And if you can, find your way into some guidance from someone who knows that territory well, then that's highly recommended as well. But we're all designed to be able to do it. We're designed to do it in as a social species. So it's helpful to have support, especially in today's world. But we're all designed to experience this journey. We're all designed to become conscious of our souls. It's our birthright. Just because most people, unfortunately, seem to not these days, doesn't mean it's not our birthright. We're, we're all capable, and it's not about hard work or like, can you, I don't know, like the manifest destiny in America, like pull up your bootstraps and work hard and you'll get it done. It's not about that. It's about opening and making ourselves available to the profound and mysterious relationships with the rest of the world. And yeah, again, to distill that, what I just said there, longing, our deepest longing, underneath what we think we want, what's our deepest longing and our deepest grief, underneath all the little hurts that we think have really broken us, what really breaks our hearts. And our grief and our longing are intimately entwined.
Wow.
We grieve for what we most deeply long for. We long for what we most deeply grieve. And so if we can learn to follow those and offer our attention outward, then we're well on our way.
Wow. Such a beautiful way to put together longing and grief. Okay, so here, a question that comes to me also is, when you return back from this descent to soul, it seems like you are going to be a totally different person. Or how is it that you join again to your community or come again to be recognized by your community? What is it that happens there?
Yeah, that's a great question to finish out the phases. And I'll try to do this quickly because I know we're moving to questions from everyone else.
Yeah.
So we had preparation, and then dissolution, the dying dismemberment phase, and then there's the bottom of the underworld. We sometimes call this soul canyon. There's 5 phases of soul canyon, the descent to soul. Preparation, dissolution, and then this one down here is what we call soul encounter. That's the territory where we have experiences of glimpses of becoming conscious of some element, some dimension of our soul. And so it's not like you're in here for 5 minutes and it's just when that experience happens. This is, it can be months, just like all of these phases can be months, if not years long. But it's that territory where you're not this anymore. You're not what you used to be. You've dissolved enough for mystery to say you're ready for an experience of an encounter with your soul. That's what we call soul encounter. An experience of glimpsing with your consciousness something of your ultimate place in the world. You're wandering neither this nor that. You're between the dying and the reborn phase. That's where a soul encounter happens. So that's the third phase. The fourth phase is what we call metamorphosis. And that's once there's been one or more soul encounters, and mystery says, all right, it's time for you to start becoming something different, right? Because here you're neither this nor that. You're in the realm of the dead, and you're wandering the underworld. You're a wanderer in the mysteries of nature and psyche. And mystery says, okay, now you have to begin to be the process of becoming someone who can consciously enact, embody, be that one in the world.
Yeah.
So here you kind of get a glimpse of being that one, or of that place in the world. And here's where you begin to learn to embody it. And so metamorphosis is the restructuring of the personality. It's a restructuring of the self as the handmaiden to soul, as the servant of soul, as the one who embodies soul in the world. Soul needs us to embody. It needs the ego. It's the shifting. It's the changing of the ego. Ego meaning, in this definition, just like our conscious self-awareness and our personality that is in the world. It's not something we can or would get rid of by this definition. Again, like soul, it has many definitions, but our ego is the restructuring of our ego to become to be the kind of self, to be the kind of personality that can embody most fully that ultimate place in the world, that ecological niche in the world. So that metamorphosis is the restructuring of the ego. And then the fifth phase, which is out of the canyon, but on the other side, is enactment, which is basically the rest of your life, where you spend trying and most often failing magnificently, but beautifully struggling to embody soul in the world, to offer that gift to the world, to be the one that was glimpsed in the soul encounter.
Yeah, it's so good. Well, I think we can start with questions from the public. And here goes with Sergio Sanchez. He says, can mystery manifest in your upper sensorial state of self in a tangible way as part of its call to descend to your own soul? Do you want me to repeat it?
I do, yeah. I didn't get a couple of words in there.
Sorry?
I didn't hear a couple of words that you said.
Can mystery manifest in your upper sensorial state of self in a tangible way as part of, oh my God, they changed it to me. Wait a minute. So again, can mystery manifest in your upper sensorial state of self in a tangible way as part of its call to descend to your own soul?
Are you saying upper sensorial self?
Yep.
I'm not sure what's meant by that phrase.
Upper sensorial state. Sergio, can you please clarify a little bit about this question? And while you do that, I'm going to go with Carolina Montano. And she says, are dreams and lucid states of dreaming, a way that our soul communicates with us? And if so, how can we learn to interpret them?
That's a big question. The short answer is yes, absolutely, 100%. The dream, our dream experiences are right at the center of that territory. This is an answer that I could spend days and days talking about, so it's hard to do a really concise answer, but I would just say that in our style of working with dreams, which we call soul-centric dream work, the goal is not interpretation. So we're not trying to create an understanding from the dream, or to gather some kind of understanding from the dream that we can feel like there's a kind of completion to the dream, or like a kind of information or knowledge that we get from the dream. Rather, the goal of our style of dream work is to let the dreams do their work on us, to be in relationship with dreams as if dreams themselves and the dreamscapes and the dream characters that we encounter themselves are mysterious, real, and autonomous others, beings that we can be in relationship with, and that mystery has offered this really potent experience. And it's as if mystery is saying something like, I want you to have this certain kind of experience, because if you let it, it will change you. In just the ways that would be really generative for you. It's as if mystery is saying something like that. And so our style of dream work is about opening ourselves to making ourselves available to that kind of being changed by being in relationship with those dreams. And then from that place often comes some kind of revelation, or like, aha, wow, I can't, now I get it. But it's not, it's the process is not interpretation, at least as we use that word, interpretation. And hopefully someday we'll do another dream work program down in Colombia.
Great. Here comes Sergio again with the question. I will rephrase my question. Can mystery materialize in your sensorial surrounding environment as part of its call to the soul? For example, can it become tangible through another living being?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Sergio. That's much more clear for me personally. And what I want to do, again, going back to the very first question, what is soul? Not to say that this is the right, that what I have been offering is the right definition of soul. It's just what I mean by soul. And so what I mean by soul, from that place, I want to encourage us to just kind of let go of the idea that soul is immaterial. Because that often means something particular to us. And I also don't mean to imply that it's strictly material. What I mean is, this is what I mean by psycho-ecological. Soul is just our place in relationship with everything else. So it doesn't manifest here and there. It's everywhere all the time. It's the pattern of relationships that we're born to inhabit. It's the style of being that the world most wants from us, because we're living into those relationships. We're inhabiting those relationships in the way that the world wants us to, that the universe, that mystery wants us to. So I would say, yes, absolutely. The mystery materializes in our surroundings all the time, in the environment, and there are, for everyone, because we're unique in particular, there are certain kinds of experiences, or certain kinds of beings, or certain places that evoke certain kinds of feelings for us, certain experiences, certain images, certain symbols, certain resonances, that we are drawn to, right? Like part of that following your longing is like, there's something about, the forest, or there's something about whales, or the under the ocean, or like, and we follow that. And we could say that that's soul materializing in that way, but materializing for me is a word that is not really necessary here. It's more like the world is mysterious everywhere, but what are the mysteries that draw me in? All parts of the world are infused with soul. The world is soul. But what are the particular mysteries that grab hold of me and pull me in? What are the particular loves that break my heart open? The particular fascinations, the particular griefs, these things. So that's soul speaking to us. And it, yes, absolutely. You may notice it more in certain places, in certain beings, in certain circumstances, in certain contexts, in certain habitats, certain ecological zones, etc., more than others. I hope that answers your question, Sergio.
Yeah. Here's another question. This comes from Adri Pau. What activities or things can we do to identify the pain that lies behind our longings? What kind of activities or things can we do to identify the pain that lies behind our longings?
Maybe I'll just tease it apart just a little bit and say longing and grief, or the pain and the longing. It's not that if you go so deeply into longing, you'll find your grief and that's the only thing that's there. It's that if you go in far enough or deeply enough into your longing, if you really let yourself become conscious of your own longing, which is strangely enough a kind of a radical act in our culture, what we discover there is something far more interesting than the rest of our lives. And that includes pain. It includes, something of the patterns of what most grabs hold of our heart and rips it open in the most beautiful ways. Just like as I was trying to answer Sergio's question, it's like, yes, certain places, certain trees, certain animals, certain ecological zones, certain dreams call to us specifically. So do certain griefs, so do certain longings. And if we follow those, if we tug on those a little bit, we tug on the threads that are following those, what we find is our unique and particular fascinations, the unique and particular ways that the world tugs at our heartstrings and says, this is something about who you are. But it's not our superficial pains. It's not our superficial wants that what we think we want. It's what's deeper, but it's that unique and particular way that they pull on us. So your question then is what can we do to find our way into that place? And just to go back to a previous answer, dreams are a great one. Our imagination, cultivating our access to our imagination. I'm just kind of going through a list, and obviously you'll have to find your way with these, and you should talk to the women of Efecto Mariposa more about how to say yes to each of these more fully. Actually let ourselves grieve. Like grief ceremonies where we can really access our griefs. Say yes to Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. That was his way of talking about this. Actually, like say yes to your longings, like make space in your lives, clear. There's another poet, Morgan Farley, who has a beautiful poem about clearing a space. That's what we have to do in our lives. We have to make space. The attention economy wants all of our attention. The industrial, technological economy, society wants all of our attention. We have to clear a space to say yes to these things. That's probably the most foundational thing that we can do, is clear a space in our lives so that we can say yes to the what we call the mysteries of nature and psyche, to the depths of our experiences, and journal about them, make art about them. It doesn't have to be good art, it doesn't have to be well written. Make poetry, speak it to the world, go for a walk early in the morning and speak or sing your praise to the other than human world out loud. Things like this, like offering our attention outward.
Beautiful. Dharma Diyanku says, I've always felt like part of my being is living in other moments. It's a beautiful sensation that I cannot describe. Sometimes it's very clear, as if I were following my own steps. Other times it's more of a feeling of joy that I don't know where it is coming from. Is my soul? What can I do with this feeling that I've been having?
Will you read just the first part of that again so I can make sure?
I've always felt like part of my being is living in other moments. It's a beautiful sensation that I cannot describe. Sometimes it's very clear, as if I were following my own steps. Other times it's more of a feeling of joy that I don't know where does it come from. Is that my soul talking to me? What can I do with this feeling that I've been having?
We would probably have to have more of a conversation for me to have a better sense about, what kind of territory that experience is coming from. But what I would say is that our becoming conscious of our soul is not a destination. It's not like you're not there, you're not there, you're not there, you're not there, and then all of a sudden you're there, or all of a sudden like you're completely conscious of it and there it is, and that's all. In fact, here's an important thing to note, is that there can be, and often are, more than one descent to soul in a person's life that follow this same kind of pattern. Notice that in the soul encounter phase, I kept saying at least a part or a dimension, an element of our soul. And so we might imagine soul as something that's always talking to us. We just don't have the ears to hear it, right? It's like there's a conversation that's always available to us, but that knock on the door and the crooked finger, that's what we mean by becoming eligible for that, is that we recognize it for what it is. That's all we mean. It's always there. The world is always and everywhere mysterious. But until we're ready to recognize that, and to recognize that we might potentially, possibly have a place in that mystery, until we're able to recognize that, we'll never hear the knock. It's not that the knock isn't happening. The knock is always there. And so it's another way to talk about this thing that is impossible to talk about is to say that we're learning how to discern, or how to listen. We're learning how to listen to mystery when it's whispering to us, and we know that by a kind of feeling sense that's doing something to us. It's changing us. And so what might be true is that, that might be your soul whispering to you, and you have moments of glimpsing it. And probably what is also true, I don't have to know anything about you just to say like this is virtually always how it works. is that there would be some other deeper ways to discover how to make yourself available to be in that conversation, and to learn to discern and to deepen your relationship with whatever is happening in those experiences. And I just can't say anything more specific without sitting down with you for tea or going for a walk in the woods.
Yeah, sure. Maybe, Nate, can you make a difference or go into the difference between soul and spirit? And what is it to go down and what is it to go up? Eliminate or light, and the difference between light and darkness?
Yeah. So I spoke about this a little bit before when I was speaking about transcendence and ascent, before I talked about what do we mean by descent and going into the underworld. So there's the upper world and underworld. It's kind of two dimensions of human consciousness. Another one that we often talk about is the middle world, which is the realm of it's the realm of the ego. It's also the realm of the social-cultural. It's like the day-to-day consciousness. But the upper world consciousness, another way to say that is that's the realm of spirit. Underworld consciousness is the realm of soul. Spirit being associated with unity and oneness, and is often the what's at the heart of the so-called world religions, especially the Eastern world religions, is experience of the upper world, experience of spirit. And I'm forgetting the second part of that question.
No, it was like spirit and soul, and between up and down, light and dark.
Yes. Yeah. So just to say, we need both of them. They're both essential dimensions of our human experience, as is the middle world. The underworld one is what's most repressed in our contemporary Western society. Not to say that the upper world and spirit, that state of consciousness and that dimension of relating to the world, of experiencing the world, is not also repressed, but not nearly to the degree that that the underworld and soul are. There's the whole history of Western consciousness tends to repress all the things that are associated with the descent, the darkness, the material, the feminine, the transformative, and it tends to associate them with evil or wrongness or things like that. And but what's actually true is that we need all of it. And my work as an underworld guide is not to say that we don't need that dimension of our human experience to be fully human, but it is to say that there's not a lot of recognition, acknowledgement, or support for the descent process in our world. And so it's a much less recognized dimension of our human experience.
Yeah. And that answer comes with this question that Carolina Montano's making. And she says, I feel that I am in the canyon willing to encounter my soul, but I feel lost. Are there practices that can help me to feel more certain and therefore being able to focus my energy into that encounter?
Thank you, Carolina. That's a good question. You're not gonna like my answer though, maybe. Which is that being lost is exactly the place to be. Maybe you will like that answer, actually. Who knows? Yeah, being lost is really important. That's the dissolution. That's the disorientation. We have to if what we're actually doing really is, I'm not just saying these words because they sound dramatic or interesting. We're really, our lives are dissolving in that dissolution process. And even when we're in soul encounter or metamorphosis or enactment, once you're through one of these phases, you still have to tend the tasks of each of the previous phases. So even when you're in soul encounter, there's still more dissolution that has to happen. And it's the being lost. It's all these really scary, but kind of alluring words that start with D, like dissolution, death, dying, dismemberment, disorientation, things like that. So the being lost is actually really important. If you were certain, I would be much more suspicious. So I wouldn't want to help you be more certain. What I would want to help you in is making yourself more available to what is there with you in your lostness, or what makes itself available to you as you're making yourself available to the world. And that's the question is, A, how can I make myself more available? Opening to the world, which has to do with that clearing of the space. That's what the dissolution process is. That's what becoming lost is. We can't be found by the world, by soul, until we're thoroughly lost. We're thoroughly dead, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so the active participation of clearing a space in our lives. So it might be that really what your task is to turn up the heat on your lostness. Like, how can you lean into that even more? How can you say yes to it even more? Which isn't to say like completely throw your life away and like do something that would be harmful to you or the people most important to you in your life. But it does make available the question of what am I actually willing to let go of my attachment to? How am I willing to make myself available? And it might begin to tug at the strings of the kind of at the foundations of your former life, of how you have known your life to be, the life that you have lived up until this point, which can be very uncomfortable. So when I kind of laugh a little bit and say, you're not going to like this answer, it's because of how uncomfortable that is. Dying is not easy. So that it's incredibly uncomfortable, and there's a lot of sacrifice. And again, it's a participation. It's not a this happens to me. It's a participation. We have to be active participants in relationship with the mysteries of nature and psyche. And sometimes that, for some people that mean, I don't know anything about your life, so I'm not talking about you specifically, but just to give some kind of obvious general examples, some people end up leaving their marriage. That's a central part of their dissolution process. Or leaving their job and going wandering, or leaving the country, and just like they're allowing their world to be completely upended. But it's not about what you do. It's about releasing your attachment to the life that you've lived. It's about making space. If we release our attachment to something, many things are going to just fly away, and we'll realize like that's not a part of who the world is asking me to be. That's not a part of who I really am. And our relationships change. I am not in relationship with most of the people I was in relationship with before my first descent to soul. And that's just the unfortunate truth of the matter. Those relationships kind of fall apart when I don't inhabit them in the same way, because I'm becoming something different. And so when the foundations of our life start to crumble, are we going to try to keep them intact and say, no, I need to feel really certain about something. I need to understand what's going on. I need to be in control here. If that's what we're doing, we're not saying yes to the journey. What needs to stay will stay. And what needs to go, we have to be willing to let go of. And that feels like lostness. That feels like dying. But that's exactly where we need to be. And it's hard.
Thank you. Here comes Danilo Rojas saying, thank you. Wonderful to feel not only this wisdom, but the respect. Wait a minute, because I'm trying to translate it immediately
I'm trying
from
also, but you're doing
Spanish.
a better job than I am.
So, maravilloso sentir ya no solo sabiduría, sino tanto respeto y humanidad en cada respuesta a las preguntas del público. No. Danilo is saying that it's wonderful to feel this wisdom, but not only this, but the respect and the humanity that you are giving to us in each of your answers to the questions that we have already made. Thank you, Danilo.
Thank you, Danilo.
Yeah. Well, being 9:22 right now, Nate, this whole conversation has been a journey in itself, and it shows a lot of things that we have to open our minds to be able to think in those realms that are not very tangible for us here nowadays in our civilizations. It's like this urgency to work on ourselves, to be able to live in communities that are ecologically oriented, that be able to feel that belonging to earth as the river feels that belonging, or the bear, or the oceans. It's like this need of mature societies that can guide our humanity consciously to this next step of evolution that we are embedded into. So this that you have said here is something that is going to be nurturing our thoughts to be able to come to our next conversation that is just about this communities, how to work in that communities, to be able to orient this humanity into a better port, if we may say. So Nate, it's been really wonderful to have you here, and wonderful that you meet our people and that we can reach more people, because when you come here, our groups are really small because we have to work one-to-one. So it's difficult to have masses, but with these conversations, we are being able to reach people that we haven't had before. So, yeah, starting to talk about these things is wonderful for us, and we hope that we can have this space open for all these deep conversations that have to come in the future, in the near future for us. So again, thank you for everything. Again, thank you for this warmth of your being with us here, and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Aleja. Yeah, and thank you, Efecto Mariposa, for having me, and most importantly, thank you, all of you all, for showing up and listening, and for being the kind of people that would show up to this kind of thing. The world needs more of people like you, and I hope to meet many of you. I hope to meet all of you at some point down the path. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we hope so. We are going to bring you this next semester, and we're going to bring you again in 2023. So anyone who is interested in that, of course, we are going to be announcing these courses and this possibility of having this experience with you here. Thank you, Nate.
Beautiful. Thanks, Aleja.
Aleja, Nate, a las traductoras Denise, Vero, muchísimas gracias. Connie y Aleja en allá de backup, fantástico, y en soporte, muchísimas gracias a todos. Gracias a todas las personas que estuvieron. Qué alegría haberlos tenido y espero que esto haya sido muy inspirador, que les haya dado luces a aquellos que se sientan perdidos, unas velitas en esas oscuridades y también como brújulas para seguir caminando. Y bueno, seguimos en estas conversaciones. La próxima será el 23 de febrero, también con Nate, en esas sociedades basadas en el alma, en la naturaleza, salir un poco de ese ego o de ese antropomorfismo, antropocentrismo y conectarnos más con algo mucho más relacionado, interdependiente, profundo y mágico. A todos muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Y nos vemos la próxima.